WRF has done a WE and RF now. It's done.
Oh, you broke it, my computer.
Oh, no, I hope not.
No.
That's all right.
We'll
I've
just
got
set it up here so you
All right.
can work on it.
Thank you. WE and RF has done a lot of very good reports in the last year on co-digestion. 2 surveys, I happen to have been involved in 2 surveys in the PSC role with a bunch of other very, very capable folks who know quite a bit more about the modern words like Bill uses so much in co-digestion. And I'll be followed a little while by Dennis Palmer, who's actually got Atlantis, a co-digestion system in operation, and he'll share a lot of the practical tips. But it's a practice that requires a lot of attention, and easing into it is not the thing to do. Planners think it's easy to do sometimes, but you'll find out between the 2 presentations that it's not quite so simple. What is co-digestion? Well, it's mixing nutrient-rich sewage sludge with a wide range of high-strength wastes. I'll call them HSWs. Fog, bulk food waste, food processing waste, grease trap waste, ag waste, all fit into the definition of high-strength waste in one way, shape, or form. Ag waste being manures and things like that. High-strength waste co-digestion is an emerging practice and the focus of recent publications, as I mentioned, from WE and RF. But without those publications, you are really fraught with a very limited range of publications that you used to go to for operating experience. Biocycle, they do a good job when they can, when they get the information, but a lot of this is just happening as we speak here today. So it's new stuff. The report that I particularly enjoyed reading and learning about and having a little influence on is called Understanding Impacts of Co-Digestion. It's by Matt Higgins and his Irish colleague, Joe Goplan, who's with Jenks and Kennedy. Kennedy and Jenks, sorry. I always got that backwards on purpose. What is a co-digestion system? It starts with collection. It can be liquid, it could be solid form or otherwise. In some cases, processing is needed to generate the feed that goes to the digester. The key point here is whatever you feed to the digester jointly with solids, sludge solids, should be paced so that things happen on a gradual, changes are slow. Transitions are where the high risk is. It's just sort of like flying a plane. It's easy to fly a plane when you're 35,000 feet in the air, but it's tough when you're landing or taking off. Same is true with the transitions in co-digestion. You don't feed part of the time and then take a break. It's something that should be done on as continual a basis, a sustained basis as possible. Biosolids handling afterwards is just that, but what effects there are from co-digestion are the subject of that report, and I encourage all of you to get that if you're interested in co-digestion. It's a great starting point, a great beginning. Gas utilization, the other facet of this drawing, is an amazing area now that is getting a lot of new outlets. But if you don't have an outlet for the gas, it's going to be a very fruitless effort to try and make it all work economically. And some of the best and largest co-digestion projects in the country, like Des Moines, began with the outlet long before they had the co-digestion. So when we hear from Dennis, we'll hear what he does with the gas that's produced there. The challenges are many. Here are a couple. Integration with the nitrogen and phosphorus reduction systems. And we saw some examples of that in the presentation by the CNPI folks. Deammonification via centrate treatment, orthophosphate, reduction via intentional removal of struvite, before or after dewatering, also before or after digestion. That's a new extension here. Orthophosphate reduction via chemical precipitation. As we saw in some of the diagrams, it's not a simple throw in some chemical to do something. You've got to be thinking through the entire mass balance. In some cases, we're just learning how to do the mass balances. You need a consistent periodic delivery of high-strength waste. Storage is going to be a requirement along to equalize the flows to the digester, coincidental to sludge flows. And it often requires a steady output of biogas because you've got a customer wanting to keep the boilers going or other things happening on a continuous basis. Then there's the uncertainty of energy production. Bioenergy is nice, but in some places we are entering the age of excess renewable energy supplies. If you could believe it, California exports solar and wind energy, and they have to pay for that export because Nevada just doesn't need it. Nevada happens to be near Hoover Dam, where electrical power is quite inexpensive. And so if you don't have the whole system put together, you're going to have some challenges, and they're going to cost you a lot. And lastly, what's the extended payback period for low energy prices? It is the financing jeopardized as a result. Some more challenges: uncertainty of tipping fees. As it turns out, there's a fierce competition for the right high-strength waste. And these are the wastes that don't overload the nitrogen or phosphorus incoming to the plant and in the recycles to the plant. We could all name examples of places where there's not enough of the right high-strength waste. Unexpected O&M cost incidents. And, I was waiting for Bill to talk about the materials issues with some materials and construction issues with Canby. They've learned a lot over the years from what they've done and applied it diligently. The same is true with Co-Digestion. You can get some materials in there that are going to make problems with your materials of construction, of your digester, of your piping, and otherwise. We all know that too. Delivery accommodation. Lots of things go into it, from security to receiving a receiving apron. What's that? A place where you can spill something on the ground and easily wash it to the drain system while getting most of the material into the storage, receiving, and metering. Billing system, tankage, heating, blending, and feed systems. Acquiring air permits and odor controls. Exhaust air from receiving tanks is odorous at best. You've got to do something with it. That means a permit. Gas conditioning and utilization, and high-strength waste characterization, which probably should be first on this list. This is a fog waste receiving station for Johnson County, Kansas Middle Basin Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's a 3-tank designed by CH2M. I was involved in this project a little bit at the very beginning. The concept had its beginnings in Sweden, where Gothenburg or Göteborg, Sweden, has long had a fog waste receiving system. It's got 3 tanks. They're mixed, they're heated. The pumps and whatnot allow blending to create the proper mix for blending again with sludge and feeding. The tower on the right is a bio tower, basically carbon in it, designed to treat the air that is exhausted as the tank is filled. It's all in an enclosed building and very neat, something neat and clean for the public to see from the Hyatt Hotel across the street from the treatment plant. And it's definitely not some of the simple types of tanks that you see in some of the designs, the early designs for these facilities. I won't mention any because it might be viewed as disparaging, but we've learned. Okay. Some of the key findings from the work, WE and RF, excuse me, Jeff, I didn't mean to, I'll get that straight. Lauren Fillmore will straighten me out if you don't. Yield stress of digestate is well correlated with volume expansion due to gas holdup. That's the most confusing expression that I have in this whole presentation. But I think you get the idea. You know, if you have syrup and you get bubbles going into it, they're going to have a hard time escaping, and they may expand the volume of that syrup. Whereas if you have something else like Coca-Cola, it tends to relieve itself to the atmosphere above. High-strength waste addition had very little impact on digestate, viscosity, and yield stress. So that's a little bit of good news. And this is really an important one. As you deal with the monovalent to divalent cation ratio as a variable, and there's been a lot of work done in places like Virginia Tech on this in dewatering, up to a ratio of about 40. That's 40 moles of a monovalent cation like potassium or sodium to divalent. You're going to see an increased polymer demand and a decrease in cake solids. And that decrease in cake solids can be a big economic factor in some places and be a deterrent to whatever kinds of co-digestion waste you might want to accept. Once you get over 40, you're way up in the way out on the curve, but the impacts are less. Avoiding digester overflows is part of this thing, and what you're looking at is a frothy sludge that went through a complex series of disasters because someone wasn't very reverent about the subject that the last thing you do before you start a digester up is say a prayer that it's going to work really well. And seriously, and that you need a good team, you need everybody on it. In this particular case, somebody decided to feed all the sludge to a digester that did not have enough seed sludge in it, and additionally, the initial startup was around 90 Fahrenheit, and then they fixed the boiler and the temperature went up to 95, and then the gas production went from 100,000 to 200,000 to 300,000 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the roof blew. So these things happen. Same thing can happen with co-digestion if you change a parameter too rapidly. And maybe Dennis will have a few things to add on that. I like this picture, but I doubt if he's seen this particular thing. So, continuing with the WRF, WE, and RF findings here. Addition of high-strength waste did not affect the M to D ratio, except in cases with high sodium or potassium concentrations. So that's what you look for. It's not a world of inquiry. It has waste characterization or high-strength waste characterization, but it's sodium or potassium. Volatile solids loading rate of high-strength waste can be added up to about 20% of the base loading to a digester in the same volume. This means you can turbocharge a digester to a certain amount, like with fog waste. I know 20% is a conservative number. I've seen it as much as 50%. But whatever you do in that kind of thing, you do it in 5% increment steps to not make it, to not witness what you just saw in that picture. And lastly, the production of odorants by the cake solids was generally lower in samples from digesters with high-strength waste added. And this really refers to a symbiotic effect that you can get with some co-digestates and sludge, beneficiating the digestion. And when you go to this WRF report, the WE and RF report, or the literature, you'll see cases where symbiotic relationships have been identified, improving the level of digestion as a result of co-digestion. High-strength waste characterization. We have to match the analytical effort to the variability of the high-strength waste. Obviously, when you have a highly variable situation, you have one strategy for sampling and monitoring as compared with consistent waste characterization where you can take a few samples and get the information you need. All of this has to lead to developing an energy balance from the mix and developing nutrient N&P balances in the liquid train. And you have issues like designing for highly variable wastes that are corrosive, abrasive, or low pH, where you have to have essential dilution taking place to protect the integrity of the materials of construction and the like. And lastly, there's permitting strategy that is associated with characterization for high-strength waste with food, ag, sanitation, or other environmental protection issues. There's a lot of things to chase down to implement this idea of co-digestion. Further research needs, well, things like what's the boundary for fog addition, admixing? How much can you really take before you have to start looking at, do you have enough nitrogen and phosphorus to handle the C/N and P ratio? And this isn't an ad for Gerhard's operation there, but C/N and P, remember the old rule, 100 to 5 to 1 or something like that? It still counts in this thing, very much so. Use of COD for routine monitoring as opposed to solids. It's another way to do it. It's strongly recommended when you get into this particular line of operation. Boundary conditions for stable operation. How far can you push the system before it becomes unstable and begins to experience volume expansion through gas holdup and the like. And then things like sustainable peak organic loading rates using COD, expressed in units of COD as opposed to solids. So you're thinking constantly in terms of a unifying factor for balances. I guess lastly, impact of HSW admixing on dewatterability and digester foaming. All of these are things that are part of the requirement to keep an eye on things daily. So that's my presentation. It's really an invitation to you to give your card to Jeff over there, and maybe you'll get yourself a little instruction on how to get a copy of that report. I really recommend you take a look at it. It's quite a good product. And there will be several more, I think, in the years to come. Thank you very much.
There's a question back there.
Yes.